Hello everyone, this is Medical Gateway, and this chapter we're going to study regarding the erythropoietin and RBC production. So what is erythropoietin? Erythropoietin is a substance, it's a hormone which basically results into RBC production from the bone marrow. And what is the main stimulus for the erythropoietin production? The main stimulus for the erythropoietin production is the hypoxia. Now, erythropoietin has to produce RBCs, and the main function of the RBCs is to carry oxygen to the tissues. So if the oxygen is not being supplied in the adequate quantity to the tissues, which is basically hypoxia, then the hypoxia will act as the main stimulus for the increased production of RBCs by stimulating the production of erythropoietin. So whenever there is hypoxia, erythropoietin is going to be produced, and erythropoietin will increase the production of RBCs. So what are the conditions which can lead to hypoxia? So these are the conditions which can be like low blood volume. Because of low blood volume, there will be hypoxia in the tissues, or anemia, or decreased in hemoglobin concentration, or decreased blood flow to the tissues, or any lung disease. All these conditions can lead to hypoxia. Lung disease can cause hypoxia because of decreased oxygenation of the tissues. Decreased blood flow can cause hypoxia because of the decreased supply to the tissues. Decreased hemoglobin will cause hypoxia because of the decreased ability to carry oxygen. And same as the anemia. And the low blood volume itself means the low blood pressure and low perfusion to the tissues and low supply of oxygen to the tissues, which is hypoxia. Now, what hypoxia is going to do? Now, if there is hypoxia, then renal tissues will also face that hypoxia. Now, whenever the renal tissues are hypoxic, they will produce hypoxia-inducible factor. And that hypoxia-inducible factor will go and will be attached on erythropoietin gene. And to be specific, hypoxia-inducible factor is attached to hypoxia response element on erythropoietin gene. So this is how it looks like. This is the DNA. For instance, this red colored is the erythropoietin gene, and the erythropoietin gene has this green colored hypoxia response element. So hypoxia-inducible factor is going to get attached to this hypoxia response element on erythropoietin gene. Now, on the response to attachment of hypoxia-inducible factor on hypoxia response element, erythropoietin genes are basically going to increase the production of erythropoietin. Now the question comes in mind, from where exactly the erythropoietin is being produced. The erythropoietin is produced from two places, the kidneys and the liver. 90% of the erythropoietin is produced by kidneys, and 10% of the erythropoietin is produced by liver. Now, it is often asked that which cells in the kidneys are producing erythropoietin. The renal epithelial cells, and to be precise, the fibroblast-like peritubular interstitial cells. So fibroblast-like peritubular interstitial cells will produce the erythropoietin. Now, what this erythropoietin is going to do? This erythropoietin will then act on bone marrow, and by acting on the bone marrow, this will lead to an increased production of the proerythroblasts, the first stage of the erythropoiesis, and the increased conversion of these erythroblasts into the mature red blood cells, and finally the increased release of the erythrocytes. Now, there are many steps in the erythropoiesis, from the proerythroblasts to finally the erythrocytes in the blood. So bone marrow, the erythropoietin is going to facilitate all of these steps. Okay, so all of these steps are facilitated by erythropoietin. So one stimulus is this hypoxia, which acts on the kidneys, and then kidneys will produce hypoxia-inducible factor, and then erythropoietin gene will result into increased production of erythropoietin, and finally the erythrocytes are produced. Now, how many days will it take from the exposure to hypoxia and the final appearance of mature erythrocytes in the blood. The whole process takes place 5 days. Okay, now after the hypoxia, immediately within few minutes, hypoxia-inducible factors are produced and erythropoietin gene gives the response. But the other steps of maturation will take some time, and after 5 days of hypoxia, the mature erythrocytes appear in the blood. So is this the only mechanism for the production of the RBCs by erythropoietin? So our hypoxia isn't the only stimulus. There is another pathway, that is the epinephrine, norepinephrine, and prostaglandins will also result into increased production of erythropoietin. So these also the sympathetic nervous system, that relate to sympathetic nervous system, the neurotransmitters, the epinephrine, norepinephrine, and the prostaglandins can also directly increase the production of erythropoietin other than the hypoxic pathway. Okay, so this is the erythropoietin, how exactly the erythropoietin is produced. Now let's discuss the factors necessary for the erythropoietin. So there are 3 types of factor. One is the general factor, then we have maturation factors, and then we have factors for hemoglobin synthesis. So general factors necessary for the erythropoiesis are that for erythropoiesis, we need erythropoietin. Obviously, we need the erythropoietin. Then we need thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is extremely important for erythropoiesis. We'll discuss thyroid hormone in detail when we'll discuss the endocrinology. Then we have growth factors, as discussed in the colony-forming units and pluripotent hematopoietic stem cells differentiation. We have discussed the growth factors, and we have discussed interleukin 3 there, which is causing the growth. Now, there are also a few other interleukins which are important growth factors, like interleukin 6 and interleukin 11. Then vitamins are also necessary for the erythropoiesis, like vitamin B, C, D, and E. Okay? These are the general factors. Then we have some maturation factors which will help mature the stages of the RBCs. Now, the maturation factors include vitamin B12, folic acid, and intrinsic factor. And these are extremely high yield with reference to the clinical application of this topic with reference to the anemias. For instance, vitamin D deficiency or folic acid deficiency or intrinsic factor deficiency, these all will result into maturation defects which will lead to anemia. Okay? So anemia is the decrease in the number of the RBCs. Okay. Then we have the factors for the hemoglobin synthesis. The factors for the hemoglobin synthesis include the proteins, the amino acids, the iron, copper, cobalt, nickel, and then again the vitamins. So iron, copper, cobalt, and nickel, the minerals, and the protein and the amino acids, and the vitamins. Which vitamins are specifically relatively more relevant with reference to the hemoglobin synthesis are vitamin C, vitamin B2, vitamin B3, and vitamin B6. Okay, so this is we are done with this topic of erythropoietin and the factors necessary for erythropoiesis. See you in next part.